I still remember the exact second my life tilted off its axis, because it happened in silence. No dramatic music, no thunder outside, just the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the faint smell of lavender that didn't belong to me. I had come home early, earlier than I ever did, my head still buzzing from a long day and a breakup that refused to stop haunting me. My ex, Maya, had been gone from my life for 6 months, but her shadow still lingered in the corners of my apartment, in the coffee mug she once loved, in the way I still checked my phone expecting a message that would never come. I tossed my keys onto the counter and walked toward my bedroom without thinking, until I stopped cold in the doorway. Someone was sitting on my bed. Not Maya, her mother.
Elena.
She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a cardigan like it was armor. Her hands clenched together as if she was holding herself in one piece. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt like it was holding its breath. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "I needed somewhere to go," she finally said, her voice steady but tired, like someone who had already cried all the tears she had. 1,000 questions slammed into my mind at once, but none of them made it to my mouth. All I could think was how wrong and surreal it felt. This woman who had once sat across from me at family dinners, who had smiled politely but never warmly, now sitting on my bed like the world had collapsed beneath her feet. I asked her if Maya knew she was here. Her eyes dropped. That answer alone told me everything. She didn't explain right away. She didn't need to. Something had broken badly. I offered her water, space, anything, but she shook her head and just sat there, staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow her. Eventually, the story came out in fragments. An argument that turned into a revelation. A marriage that had been hollow for years finally shattering. A house that no longer felt safe. She said my name like it surprised her that I was real, like I was the last familiar thing left in a world that had turned hostile. I should have told her this was a mistake. I should have called Maya. I should have drawn a line. Instead, I sat down in the chair across from her and listened. Hours passed. Night settled in. The distance between us felt charged, heavy with things neither of us dared name. I wasn't attracted to her in the way people might assume. I was drawn to the vulnerability, to the shared wreckage of loving the same person and losing her in different ways. When she finally lay back on the bed, exhausted, fully clothed, turned toward the wall like a guest afraid to take up space, I stood there wondering when exactly my life had taken such a strange turn. Before leaving the room, I paused and said quietly that she could stay as long as she needed. She whispered thank you, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a temporary kindness. It was the beginning of something complicated, something dangerous, something that would test every boundary I thought I had. And if this story already has you wondering what happens next, make sure you subscribe now, because this is only the first crack in the storm. Living with your ex's mother isn't something you prepare for, and there's no rule book for the emotional landmines that come with it. Days turned into a strange routine where we moved around each other carefully, like two people sharing a fragile secret. Elena cleaned dishes she didn't use, folded blankets that were already neat, thanked me too often. At night, I lay awake listening to her pacing softly in the living room, haunted by thoughts she never said out loud. Slowly, the silence between us changed. We talked about everything except Maya, about regret, about the terrifying freedom that comes when a life collapses and leaves nothing but choices behind. I learned things about Elena I never knew when she was just my girlfriend's mom. She had dreams once, dreams she'd packed away for the sake of stability. She had loved deeply and been disappointed quietly. I saw her not as a role, not as a taboo, but as a person standing at the edge of reinvention. And that scared me more than anything. One evening, she admitted she felt invisible for years, and that sitting on my bed that first night wasn't about comfort. it was about survival. I realized then that this situation wasn't about attraction or rebellion. It was about two people who had been left behind by the same storm, clinging to whatever felt solid. When Maya finally called, the tension snapped tight. Elena listened on the other side of the door, tears streaming silently, while I told Maya only what was necessary. Some truths weren't mine to tell. Eventually, Elena decided to leave, not because she had to, but because she was ready. On her last morning, she stood in my bedroom doorway again, the same place where everything had begun, but she looked different, stronger, steadier. She thanked me, not just for the bed, but for reminding her she wasn't alone in the world. When she walked out, the apartment felt emptier than it ever had after Maya left. I understood then that some connections aren't meant to last forever, but they change you permanently. This wasn't a scandalous love story. It was a story about timing, loss, and unexpected human connection. And if the story moved you even a little, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, the quiet hope, then subscribe to the channel. Because there are more stories like this waiting for you, and the next one might hit even closer to home. That I thought her leaving would be the end of it. That the apartment would slowly return to being just walls and furniture instead of a place heavy with unspoken meaning. I was wrong. What no one tells you is that some people don't leave your life when they walk out the door. They settle into your thoughts instead. Elena's absence was louder than her presence had ever been. The first night after she left, I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed she had once sat on, lost and shaking, and realized it no longer felt like mine, felt like a memory. Days passed, and I tried to bury myself in routine. Work, gym, late-night takeout, anything to keep my mind busy. But everywhere I went, I carried the weight of what had happened. Not guilt, not desire, but a strange sense of responsibility for a chapter of someone else's life I had witnessed up close. Then, a week later, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was Elena. Just 4 words. I hope you're well. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. When I replied, the conversation stayed cautious, polite, almost formal, until it didn't. She told me she had moved into a small apartment across town, that she had started therapy, that for the first time in decades she was making choices without asking permission. I told her I was glad, and I meant it more deeply than I expected. Over the following weeks, our messages became a quiet rhythm. Never crossing lines, never rewriting the past, just two people checking in from opposite sides of change. One evening, she admitted something that stayed with me. That the night she showed up at my place, she wasn't just running from a broken marriage. She was running toward the realization that she deserved more from life. Hearing that made me understand my role in all of this. I wasn't the destination. I was the doorway, the strange, uncomfortable bridge between who she had been and who she was becoming. When Maya finally confronted me in person months later, it wasn't explosive like I'd feared. It was sad, honest, necessary. She asked if anything inappropriate had happened. I looked her in the eye and said no, because the truth was far more complicated and far more human than scandal. Some stories aren't about crossing forbidden lines. They're about standing on them and choosing not to. Walking away from that conversation, I felt lighter, like a knot I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally loosened. The last time Elena and I spoke, she thanked me again. Not with emotion this time, but with certainty. She said meeting me at that moment in her life reminded her that kindness could exist without expectation. When the call ended, I sat alone and smiled. Not because I missed her, but because I understood what the entire experience had given me. Perspective. Healing doesn't always come from the people we expect. Sometimes it comes from the most unexpected knock on the door. And if this chapter made you reflect on the strange turns life can take, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. because the next story might arrive when you least expect it. 2.